President Ronald Reagan was born on February 6, 1911. He went to Dixon High School. Later on, he went to Eureka College and majored in economics and sociology. In 1932, President Ronald Reagan graduated college and became a sports announcer. In 1937, he got a contract with Warner Brothers and started his acting career. Ronald Reagan became captain in the U.S. Army Air Corps and made training films for prepare soldiers. Later on, he became president of the Screen Actors Guild, or the SAG. As president of the guild, his influence of anti-communism in movies spread. Reagan made a speech for presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. Though Goldwater lost, Reagan's speeches won his popularity from the Republican Party. Reagan was governor of California for 2 terms, 1967 through 1975. In 1980, he got the nomination from the Republican Party with George H.W. Bush as vice president. He went against Democratic Jimmy Carter and liberal Republican John Anderson. In a landslide vote, Reagan won the election. On March 30th, 1981, there was an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan's life. He was injured with a punctured lung, but soon recovered and was back in office. Ronald Reagan died on June 5, 2004, after suffering from Alzheimer's for almost a decade. Some of the things that Ronald Reagan is known for is for strengthening the relationship between the USSR and the US by meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev at the Four Summits meeting. Although he did increase the deficit, he left tax reductions, tighter interest rates, and created an economic prosperity at this time. After his terms in office, he left a political impact, increasing Republican control in the Senate and in Congress. When Israel invaded Lebanon in 1882, Reagan and other countries deployed troops to enforce a ceasefire. When the Israelis withdrew from Lebanon, the American troops became the target for the rebels. In October 23, 1883, terrorists blew up a Marine barracks, killing 241 servicemen. Afterwards, Reagan and his administration reassessed the problem and withdrew troops from Lebanon. In 1884, American hostages were kidnapped by Iranian terrorists. Reagan and his administration set up a deal with the Iranians that in exchange for weapons they would release some of the hostages. The money bought with these weapons went to funding the Contra efforts in Nicaragua, which was prohibited by the Boland Amendment. Reagan first ignored the fact that this happened, but after investigations he later took responsibility. During his first years in office, Reagan had a massive increase in military spending. The reason for this is because he had a great distrust that the Soviets were not keeping in line with the SALT II treaty. The main objectives for the military buildup was to strengthen in case of war and to build trust between the European allies. Between the years of 1881 and 1885, there was a 7% increase in the military budget, resulting in $1 trillion. In fact, in March of 1881, Reagan rose the defense budget to $220 billion, the largest it has ever been in a time of peace. During Reagan's second term, he changed his views on the Soviets, especially when Gorbachev came to power in 1985. Reagan reached out to him and they met for the first time at the Geneva summit. They met 3 more times at different summits and discussed their problems. They later signed the INF Treaty, which rapidly reduced the nuclear weapons in each country. Reagan and Gorbachev's relationship was one of the main factors that led to the end of the Cold War. Reagan used the policy of Reaganomics to help reduce the involvement of the government in the U.S. economy and tried to encourage private business. He also implemented supply-side economics. This theory states that the people paid less taxes, they could save more money. Therefore, banks could lend more money to businesses, increase productivity. Then, the supply would go up, decreasing the price. The economy went into a recession on July 1981 to November 1982. To help, he implemented tax cuts, declining interest rates, and lower inflation. Consumers started to spend again. Even with heavy cuts, the government spending still was more than its revenue. At the end of its first term, he imposed higher taxes and moved away from the supply-side economics theory as the national debt doubled. He also cut back on the government involvement in American industry. Reagan cut spending on airline industry, saving and loan industries,
and removed price controls on oil. In an effort to control the economy, he disregarded the effects of his policies on the environment.